From the sun-baked hills of Tekoa, a land cradled in the rugged embrace of Judah, emerged a figure whose hands knew the rough wool of sheep better than the smooth parchment of scrolls. This was Amos, a man forged by the solitude of the wilderness, a humble shepherd whose days were a rhythm of tending flocks and pruning sycamore trees. His life was simple, etched against the vast, silent expanse of the Judean desert, a life deeply connected to the earth and its cycles. Yet beneath his quiet demeanor, Amos was an astute observer, his eyes keenly absorbing the subtle currents of human nature, particularly the insidious decay he perceived festering in the opulent northern kingdom of Israel. He saw the whispers of injustice carried on the wind, the faint echoes of suffering that reached even his remote pastures. Then, without warning, the profound stillness of his existence was shattered by a divine intervention. A sudden, undeniable calling from God descended upon him, a force so potent it shook the very foundations of his being. Amos, a man of simple words and simpler means, felt an overwhelming sense of inadequacy, a profound reluctance to shoulder such a monumental burden. How could he, a mere herdsman, speak for the Almighty to a nation that had forgotten its way? Yet the call was absolute, resonating deep within his soul, filling him with an unshakable sense of duty. He was granted a searing vision of Israel's corruption, a chilling glimpse into its impending judgment, and the weight of this knowledge pressed upon him, heavy and inescapable. Leaving behind the tranquil rhythm of his life, Amos journeyed north, his footsteps carrying him towards Bethel, the very heart of Israelite worship. The contrast between his desolate home and the vibrant, bustling cities of the northern kingdom was stark. Here, he witnessed firsthand the dazzling opulence that masked a gaping spiritual void. The rich flaunted their wealth, their houses adorned with ivory, their feasts overflowing, while the poor languished in abject misery, their cries unheard. A growing anger mingled with profound sorrow filled Amos as he observed the nation's spiritual decline, its moral fabric fraying under the weight of greed and indifference. Driven by this righteous indignation, Amos began to speak. His voice, unpolished and direct, cut through the sophisticated chatter of the markets and the solemn rituals before the altars. He was a jarring presence, a rustic prophet in a land of polished priests and cunning merchants. His denunciations were sharp, aimed squarely at the pervasive social injustice, the oppression of the poor, the corruption that festered within the courts, the exploitation of the vulnerable. He even prophesied against the surrounding nations, a tactic that initially lulled the Israelites into a false sense of security, making them believe God was only concerned with their enemies. But Amos soon turned his gaze inward, detailing with painful precision the betrayal of justice that had become endemic. He spoke of the wealthy landowners crushing the needy, of judges taking bribes to pervert righteousness, of merchants using false weights and measures to cheat their customers. The legal system, once a pillar of fairness, had become a tool for the powerful, a shield for the corrupt. Amos's despair deepened as he recognized the systemic nature of this corruption, a rot that had permeated every layer of society. His messages, however, were met not with repentance, but with scorn, ridicule, and outright disbelief. The people of the northern kingdom were too comfortable in their prosperity, too enamored with their material wealth to heed the warnings of a humble shepherd. Religious leaders dismissed him as a madman, a foreign agitator disrupting their carefully constructed order. Yet for Amos, a sense of impending doom hung heavy in the air, a chilling premonition that only he seemed to grasp. He, a lone voice against a nation, now prepared to confront the ultimate symbol of their corruption, the king's chief priest. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Amos, his simple shepherd's staff, gripped firmly, approached the magnificent royal sanctuary at Bethel. The air, thick with the scent of incense and sacrificial offerings, seemed to mock the spiritual desolation he felt within its walls. Gold gleamed on the altars, intricate carvings adorned the pillars, and the rich tapestry of ritual unfolded before him, a stark and jarring contrast to his own humble origins. Yet this grandeur, he knew, was but a deceptive cloak, masking a profound spiritual emptiness. He watched the throngs of people, their faces complacent, engaged in practices that were but hollow echoes of true worship, their hearts turned towards idols and their lives marred by immorality. The sight solidified his resolve. His indignation, once a burning ember, now flared into an unquenchable fire, fueled by divine purpose. With a voice that resonated with the authority of the Almighty, Amos delivered his most scathing prophecies directly within the hallowed confines of the sanctuary. He did not mince words, denouncing the false worship, the empty rituals, and the blatant hypocrisy that permeated the religious elite. His gaze, piercing and unwavering, fell upon Amaziah, the chief priest of Bethel, and through him challenged the very authority of King Jeroboam II. Amos declared with chilling clarity God's imminent judgment upon the royal house and the entire land, a judgment brought about by their relentless pursuit of injustice and their abandonment of divine law. Amaziah, a man accustomed to unquestioning deference, recoiled in a mixture of shock and fury. His face, usually composed, contorted with rage as he confronted Amos. He accused the shepherd of treason, of conspiring against the king, of sowing discord and sedition among the people. His voice, elevated to a commanding roar, ordered Amos to leave Bethel, to return to Judah, his homeland, and to prophesy there, if he must. The tension in the sanctuary became palpable, a heavy weight pressing down on the gathered worshippers, as the chief priest and the humble prophet engaged in a public shouting match, a clash between earthly power and divine truth. But Amos, unyielding in his conviction, refused to be silenced. His eyes, fixed on Amaziah, burned with an inner fire as he reaffirmed his divine commission. He declared, not with pride but with profound humility, that he was no professional prophet, no paid seer, but a simple shepherd, a dresser of sycamore trees, called directly by God to deliver this message. Then, with an authority that transcended human office, Amos delivered a personal prophecy of devastating judgment against Amaziah and his family. He foretold that Amaziah's wife would become a harlot in the city, his sons and daughters would fall by the sword, his land would be divided by a measuring line, and he himself would die in an unclean land. These words, stark and brutal, cut through the priest's carefully constructed facade of authority, exposing his underlying fear, his desperate grip on a power that was rapidly slipping away. The crowd, which moments before had been a unified mass, now stood visibly divided. Whispers of dissent and doubt began to spread, like ripples across a still pond. Some were genuinely shocked, their faces pale with fear at Amos's audacious pronouncements. Others, particularly among the common people, felt a stirring in their hearts, a recognition of the truth in the shepherd's words, a faint glimmer of hope that someone dared to speak for them. Yet the ruling class, the wealthy and the powerful who stood to lose everything, viewed Amos as a dangerous threat, a rabble-rouser whose words could unravel the very fabric of their comfortable existence. Amos, the simple shepherd, had become a symbol of defiance, a lone voice challenging the corrupt establishment. News of the unprecedented confrontation quickly reached the ears of King Jeroboam II. Initially, the king had dismissed Amos as a mere eccentric, a harmless zealot from the south. But Amaziah's agitated report, coupled with the growing unrest among the populace, forced him to reconsider. He now saw Amos not as a madman, but as a genuine threat to the stability of his reign, a disruptive force that could ignite rebellion. A royal decree was swiftly issued, declaring Amos an outlaw, ordering his immediate expulsion from the northern kingdom, or worse, his arrest. Amos, having ignited a firestorm within the heart of Israel, now found himself a hunted man, a prophet without honor, forced to navigate a land where the very power he sought to reform pursued him relentlessly, seeking to silence his voice forever. Amos, now an exile from the northern kingdom, found himself back in the familiar sun-baked hills of Judah. Though physically removed from the heart of Israel's corruption, his prophetic voice was far from silenced. The fiery words he had spoken in Bethel, the scathing condemnations of injustice, and the dire warnings of impending doom continued to echo, not only in the memories of those who had heard him, but also through the meticulous recordings he diligently made. He committed his prophecies to parchment, ensuring their preservation, transforming his immediate, spoken message into a timeless warning that transcended geographical boundaries and the limitations of his own lifespan. His experience had taught him that the truth, once uttered, could not truly be contained. As years gave way to decades, Amos's prophecies, initially dismissed with scorn and ridicule, began to resonate with an unsettling accuracy. The conditions he had so vehemently decried did not improve. In fact, they worsened. The rich grew richer, the poor sank deeper into destitution, and the scales of justice tipped ever more precariously in favor of the powerful. The blatant injustices, the widespread corruption, and the moral decay became undeniable, even to the most complacent. Some among the common people, those who had witnessed Amos's courageous stand, began to recall his words with increasing unease. A subtle shift occurred, a quiet stirring of memory and conscience. A small underground movement of those who believed, who remembered the shepherd prophet's unwavering conviction, started to form, their hope fragile but persistent. Then, the shadow of the Assyrian Empire stretched across the horizon, a terrifying and relentless force. The northern kingdom of Israel, weakened by its internal corruption, its spiritual rot, and its unheeded warnings, was ripe for conquest. Amos's prophecies of invasion and destruction, once dismissed as the ravings of a madman, began to manifest with chilling precision. The complacent comfort that had once defined the nation dissolved into a gnawing fear which eventually gave way to profound despair. The people who had scoffed at the shepherd from Tekoa now looked eastward with dread, seeing the inevitable approach of the very doom he had foretold. The inevitable arrived with brutal finality. The Assyrians invaded, their armies sweeping through the land. Samaria, the proud capital of the northern kingdom, endured a protracted and brutal siege. Its eventual fall was catastrophic. The city was razed, its inhabitants subjected to brutal destruction, and the surviving Israelite people were forcibly exiled from their homeland, scattered across distant lands. This was the ultimate tragic fulfillment of Amos's most dire warnings, a devastating vindication of his prophetic word. It was a powerful emotional moment of reckoning for a nation that had stubbornly refused to listen, a bitter harvest sown from seeds of injustice and spiritual apathy. Amos, likely an old man by this time, bore witness to the catastrophe. His heart undoubtedly was filled with profound sorrow for his people, for the suffering they endured. Yet, his message of justice, righteousness, and the unyielding consequences of moral failing endured. The prophetic book of Amos, a testament to his unwavering courage and divine commission, became a beacon. It stood as a stark reminder of divine justice and the dire consequences of unheeded warnings, a powerful narrative for future generations. His life's work, though seemingly a failure in his own time, when his words were largely rejected, transformed into an enduring source of wisdom and a call to conscience. Amos's legacy was not one of vengeance, but of redemption, forged through truth. His unwavering commitment to speaking God's uncomfortable truth to power, regardless of the personal cost, resonated through the ages. He inspired future prophets, reformers, and all who dared to challenge injustice. His story serves as a timeless reminder that truth, however uncomfortable, however inconvenient, however fiercely resisted, will ultimately prevail. The shepherd who faced a corrupt nation left behind a legacy that continues to challenge, to inspire, and to remind humanity of its profound responsibility to seek justice and righteousness.